Welcome to another movie plot and enjoy the memories. We open with a wax museum burning down and claiming the lives of 200 victims. Sarah and Mark insist they were all monsters and the zombie hand following them home suggests that they're telling the truth. It clings to the back of their cab and returns with them to Sarah's apartment building where Mark drops her off at. She lives with her alcoholic stepfather who threatens a backhand for coming home at 3 a.m. but he never follows through. While he downs some generic beer, Sarah cries alone in her room about losing her friends to the monsters in the museum. Sometime during the night the zombie hand attacks the walking whiskey bottle in a wife beater, so Sarah comes to save him for whatever reason. However, Handy is strangely determined to get this man and grabs a hammer to bludgeon him to death with an accumulation of forehead bonks. Handy then hits Sarah with the mustard, a little bit of onion and a few hot dog buns, but they cut the wieners. She eventually shoves it in the garbage disposal, then sits back and enjoys the corn syrup shower while giving us her best scream. With the real killer turned into soup, Sarah sits on trial for the murder of her stepfather, and let's see what the judge thinks her chances are. They also try to pin the deaths of everyone inside the museum on her, so Mark defends her by making himself look even crazier. Nobody believes their story about a killer hand, so Mark brings Sarah to the home of his late mentor whose demise came at the paws of a werewolf. Sir Wilfred projects his final message, leaving his extensive collection of supernatural artifacts to Mark, which is like giving a bazooka to a toddler. It's mostly movie props like Norman Bates memorabilia and Jason Voorhees mask, but you could probably sell this crap for a lawyer. Our toddler finds his bazooka in the form of a time compass that could allow them to collect evidence before they burned down the museum. Sarah's concerned, but this is to clear her name, so he opens a little door on the dial which creates a portal in the mirror. The pair leap through and fall down a rabbit hole, but a demonic bat-looking thing swoops in and carries away Sarah. Mark, on the other hand, finds himself a child again in what looks like some crappy home movie. His mother hikes her dress and says it's time to come home, so young Mark runs straight into her womb and turns into a fetus. He then appears as a butler in a creepy old mansion, and we just pretend for the rest of the movie like we didn't see that. Villagers arrive asking to speak with the master Frankenstein as they're concerned about the rumors surrounding a monster. They're interrupted by the doctor's wife Sarah, who's lost in the character, so she only recognizes Mark as the help. While Frank sends the villagers away, the hunchback servant Felix takes Mark to the dungeon where he's ordered to feed the monster. The food comes from a barrel of maggoty slop, so Mark gives him some of Frank's leftovers instead and finds one of the doctor's notebooks on how to reanimate the dead. He then sneaks inside the doctor's bedroom and wakes up Sarah, who needs to be snapped out of the character and reminded who she is. With the notebook as evidence that a reanimated hand was trying to kill them, they begin escaping, but banging on the front door alerts the doctor. An angry mob breaks down the door, so everyone retreats into the cellar, but Sarah's still conflicted whether to go with her boyfriend or the stranger she just met. Dr. Frank orders Felix to kill Mark, so he lumbers around the room until he lets himself get hit in the head, assuming this mustn't be real. It certainly felt like it was real, and now the monster has Mark, but it releases him for not feeding him the slop. Mark ushers Sarah through a portal while the monster turns on his creator and crushes his head, sending his brain flying out the top. Just as the villagers break down the door, Mark escapes through the portal while the monster punches his hand through Felix. Now Mark's in a monotone horror movie outside of a haunted house with a team of ghost hunters led by John. His groupies include Gloria, who has plenty of personality to go around, and Elenore, who could use some more. Sarah, however, has landed far above them in a spaceship, living out her horror fantasies as Ellen Ripley with a wig to match. Mickey has been attacked by an alien and argues with Roger about getting them into this, while Nigel has a tiny earring. Everyone pulls their guns on each other because someone might have a baby alien growing inside them, but the mother alien arrives. The crew put on their spacesuits and open fire, but none of the bullets do any damage to the alien or even the surrounding ship for that matter. The wannabe xenomorph kills Roger by stretching his head off his body, then slamming it back down into a red mist. They then blow a hole in the side of the ship, which worked in Aliens, but not this time, as Mickey feels a tap on his shoulder like "excuse me." It then proceeds to kill him by removing his air hose and letting his head pop, while Sarah and Nigel escape onto a shuttle. The movie pans back down to Earth, where the scariest thing that Mark's seen are these girls who just blankly stare at him. He's unable to get the compass working until freeing the soul of a colorful ghost girl who was murdered by her own father. The only other thing beside her that's colored is a shining amount of blood that completely floods the room. Mark comes across Elenore with Gloria already possessed swinging from her neck and signaling to the basement. The two go down and find John tied up with his ribcage exposed, but he doesn't seem too bothered by it, honestly.
Accidents do happen, you know.
What bothers him more is Mark undoing the wrong rope, sending John face first into the ground and needing to be helped up. As Mark plucks stones from the hunter's ribcage, John says they must read a Bible passage to the girl buried at their feet to set her ghost free. However, the girl's father possesses Elenore and prevents Mark from getting the Bible by throwing stuff at him. It all hits John because Mark avoids them, including a big bag of salt that bursts all over his ribcage. Mark knocks out Ellie and retrieves the Bible but accidentally uses vinegar to wash off the salt because he thought it was water. By now John's completely numb anyway, so Mark reads the passage releasing the little girl's spirit before Gloria stabs him. With the ghost defeated, the compass works again, so Mark says his goodbyes and departs through a portal to go find Sarah. She's about to escape on the shuttle, but Nigel regurgitates an alien that impregnated him earlier. It latches onto Sarah's head and begins forcing a tentacle down her throat, but Mark arrives and chops it up with a fireman's axe. He's apparently been on his own adventures and lost Frankenstein's notebook inside the Loch Ness Monster, so for evidence has a voodoo coffin that resurrects the dead. Just then there's an explosion as an alien enters and grabs Mark, so he sticks a grenade in its stomach and destroys it. Before more enter, he escapes with Sarah through a portal but has no way to save the coffin, so it explodes along with the spaceship. The pair find themselves in medieval England needing new evidence when a bunch of knights ride up and punch Mark in the face. One throws Sarah over his horse and takes her back to their castle while the audience and Mark meet the master of exposition. He says the knights work for an evil ruler called Scarabis, then gives Mark a sword to avenge his wife who was killed by the henchman George. These two have their plump executioner tickle a woman strapped to a pentagram, then has her taken away when Sarah arrives. She receives a slap from Scarabis, who is her brother in this universe, and plans to marry her off to the King of England. Meanwhile, Mark sneaks inside the castle, but Sarah had her virginity checked, so needed to get drunk and now can barely stand. He carries her out until coming across a cult performing a ritual with the woman who got feathered and a panther. Everyone begins chanting Latin, causing her to morph into the animal and the ugliest looking superhero Wakanda has ever seen. The werewolf looking mutant thing is then thrown in the dungeon and everyone returns to their day jobs, leaving the spellbook just lying around. Mark and Sarah sneak in and plan to bring the book back to the future as their evidence, but get captured by the unsettling henchman. Mark is tied up in the dungeon with a bucket over his head, but when George leaves, a raven enters with the voice of Wilfred.
Remember?
He says that Mark discovered an alternate dimension, which is why all the time periods are more like movies and less like history. Wilfred describes it as God's Nintendo game, then pecks the main character free and flies away.
Well, I have to go now.
We don't see how he gets a hold of him, but Mark escapes by strangling the circular guard who somehow got too close and taking his keys. He then releases all the prisoners who rally behind him to charge the throne room, where a jester bounces around like a damn fool. Sarah meets her elderly fiancé King Arthur. However, during their feast the host poisons the king's drink so that he falls ill. He's placed in a room to rest while Scarabis can go into the next room, where his cult transform him into the king like they did the Panther Girl. The escaped prisoners charge the room, killing Scary's men and trying to warn the kings, but he's already been replaced by the imposter. Mark notices a piece of the king's cloth sticking out of a hidden door and they find the real king getting executed by cultists. They just scatter like roaches, but the imposter escapes because nobody was going to prevent someone who looks like the king from leaving. Mark catches up to Scary trying to kidnap Sarah and pushes one of his men into some water where he's eaten by a large creature. He's beaten up a little by another guard, but this one he flattens with the oversized spellbook before passing out. Scarabis reveals his most sinister plan yet, to produce babies with Sarah, but he's disappointed to learn that his sister isn't into that.
Totally.
He orders George to kill her instead, but Mark wakes up and grabs the Georgettes, which takes him out for about 20 minutes. He then takes on the villain in a sword fight that sees the compass bring them through a portal into Dr. Jekyll's laboratory. Mr. Hyde watches the duel confused before they disappear through a portal into a zombie invasion where Mark is dressed like John Travolta. Survivors battle a horde of zombies in a shopping mall and Mark gets another reanimated hand for evidence before disappearing through another portal. They appear in England 1888 and interrupt the Ripper as he's about to finish off his latest victim. Mark kicks him through a portal into a silent film where a big-headed Nosferatu is preying on Drew Barrymore. Mark and Scary come dueling their way through the room and out the other side, leaving Jack behind for the vampire to drink. Next they appear inside a Godzilla film complete with crappy wigs and Mark talking in an authentically horrible dub.
Oh no!
They aren't here for long and the monster just looks at them before the fighters return to medieval England. George has begun to strangle Sarah, but this lizard keeps a knife on his belt, so she sticks it in his back and turns him into a blanket. Scary gets the upper hand, so Mark throws the zombie hand in his face and shoves him into the arms of the Panther Lady. She rips him apart to get her revenge while Mark grabs Sarah and uses the compass to make a portal to the real world. The book-flattened soldier briefly returns looking horrible as ever, but Sarah flails him in the top of the dome and he's done. For the plot's sake the portal will only let one person return, so despite her protests Mark pushes Sarah through with the zombie hand. She appears in Wilfred's home and looks at an old painting to see that it's marked despite this being a completely different dimension. With a zombie hand on display, Sarah clears her name for the murder of the stepfather and gets swarmed by reporters outside of the courthouse. A man steps out from the crowd to give Sarah a package that's been in their possession for many years, like this is Back to the Future. But this time the DeLorean is stuffed inside the envelope with a letter to join Mark in time, despite once again this being a completely different universe. Not sure how safe it is for a modern woman to live in the Dark Ages, but Sarah uses the compass to do it anyway. And the movie ends.